U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack signaled this week that his agency is about to give the okay to Valley Meat Company to open a horse slaughterhouse and processing facility near Roswell. Vilsack says the federal measure banning commercial horse slaughter has long since expired and indicated the USDA has little choice but to make sure the plant is operating safely and then issue the license. Opponents, however, say slaughtering horses is a moral issue as well as one of food safety. Proponents say the facility is the most humane option to deal with horses that are unwanted and often end up shipped to Mexican slaughterhouses right through New Mexico with inhumane conditions. Now, Daniel, this is something
shocking. You come to me first.
Shocking, eh? I heard Roswell in there, I heard some other things. But here's the interesting part. It's split Republicans, big-time Republicans here. Steve Pearce is pro. It's in his district. He wants some jobs. He'll support it. Our governor has been firm since early saying this should not happen in New Mexico. Who's going to win the day here?
Well, I don't know who's going to win the day. I think Pierce should win the day. I mean, the government shouldn't be deciding what your business can or can't be. The law says you can open the business. If the guy can't sell any meat or he violates the laws, you close him down. But this is insane. I mean, there is so much, I was doing a lot of reading outside of the stuff that you guys sent us, Gene. There is so much data that supports that we need this in this part of the country, that these horses are starving to death, they're being mistreated. And what's interesting is I find most of the people that are opposed to this, if you stop them and ask them, have you ever owned a horse? They tell you no. The horse is not like a puppy. You don't take it to your house, buy a little dog food. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of dollars to care for these animals. And the alternative right now is we're putting them on trucks and shipping them across the border, and we know it's not being done humanely. Sure. So I think that this, I think the governor's wrong. The law says that they should open this. People should let them open it, make sure they follow it, follow the rules and regulations that are in place today. I just find it interesting, which will stir everybody up with this comment. I just find it interesting, Gene, that we talked about this inhumane and the slaughter of these animals. It sounds to me like this is a choice issue, that the owner of the horse has the right to make a choice. And it seems like some people are for choice in some issues and opposed to choice in other issues, and I'm not sure how that works out.
That happens in this world. It's interesting. Diane, let me ask you about this. I hear Dan's point, but on the other side of it, the government does say to many businesses what they can and cannot do.
Of course they do.
Absolutely they do. There's no question about this whatsoever. And public opinion here in this state in the polling is running very strongly opposed to this. No. Whether that should mean something to this business owner is up for debate again. But again, how impactful should the public comment be on this? Does it mean something to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I will tell you that I personally found it abhorrent, but that's an initial reaction. I think any of us who have owned horses or had horses or been around horses, they really are something special to us. They're not just a work animal, even though that is very much part of our tradition. But what concerns me the most is, in the reading I've been doing, is two things. One is the federal government no longer funds the inspection of these plants, and that's why the industry closed down and went away in the last 10 years.
Sure.
And the second thing is that the company, as I understand it, that's advocating for this, has actually been penalized and had some problems in the past about not complying at that time.
That was when they were slaughtering cattle and cows, and
right.
They had a big pile of offal, the innards of animals piled up in behind the thing, and the waste was a problem.
And
that always seems to be an indication with all these horse slaughter plants. They always have these problems, it seems like.
But then again, I look at it and I saw all the pictures of the guy, the vet, whose horses were he was just leaving them to starve. And so I think there must be a way that we could do this but I don't know, but not unless you have, and this is really people will yell at me, unless you have the regulation to safeguard the public and the animals themselves.
That's right. It's tricky. Laura, on that point, food safety. What we're going to be processing here ostensibly are horses that have had drugs administered. They're racing horses. No one's quite sure what the marketplace is for that. European continent eats a lot of horse, but they have a lot of horses over there to eat. They don't necessarily need our drugged horses to do this. So who benefits here? If there's no marketplace for this, is Dan right? Should they just open and find out organically nobody wants this stuff? Or should we just stop this ahead of time, just for our own reputation here in New Mexico?
Well, I don't know that, I sort of think it'll be if you build it, they will come. sort of a situation, because there isn't another option right now. And there hasn't been, I think the senator's correct, there hasn't been, I think since 2006 when they stopped funding it. In 2011, there was funding now to basically pay for the regulators to ensure that it was safe. But I think it's a very complicated issue. I think for people who are in that area, who live in that area, you know, this is supposed to provide 40 jobs. So I know that for people in that area where jobs are tough to come by, those 40 jobs are going to make a difference to that community. On the other hand, I do think there's a lot of people who feel, and the public opinion, you can't help but take it into account, I think.
Okay.
You know, in a lot of environmental issues, a lot of situations where public health and safety, environmental or otherwise, is an issue, public opinion matters. So people showing up and actually saying this is terrible and shouldn't be a part of our community, I think will be taken into account and should be. And there's also, I understand, a federal effort to try to ban the export of meats and other products that come from slaughterhouses like this. So that could in effect make the entire thing moot, and they wouldn't have a market at all. They wouldn't be able to do it.
That's an interesting point there, John. And John, on our delegation side, everyone but previously named Congressman Pierce seems to be opposed to this as well, along with our governor. And what's interesting, again, on this issue is even Secretary Vilsack quoted saying, we need to be more creative on this idea of how we manage excess horses out there, neglected horses. And here's the thing, we have a drought in this state. This is only going to get worse. We have hay-assisted feed programs for horse owners out there. It's a terrible problem. So organically, where do you see this fitting in to solve the overall bigger problem of all these unwanted horses?
Well, I mean, I think that the approach has got to be a humane one, which means that we really need to be looking at euthanasia and population control. I mean, I agree with Dan on one very limited basis. I disagree with most of what he had
I'm in
to say.
trouble. There goes my conservative card.
That there are people that own horses that shouldn't own them, and that's part of the problem.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is we have animal cruelty statutes. The reason why this is so damaging to the reputation of New Mexico is because there are articles about it appearing in the New York Times in the last week. Those follow on from articles that were appearing in the national press about our horse racing industry and the abuses in that. The reason it gives such a reputational black eye to New Mexico is that there's a societal consensus in this country that we are going to treat animals humanely. And the fact of the matter is it's very difficult, if not impossible, to slaughter horses humanely. Because of the process involved. They're much more skittish than cattle. Their brains are farther set in their skulls, and so it's hard to stun them before they're killed. So they're literally killed while they're still conscious, many of them.
That's right.
And so the fact of the matter is that we have the societal consensus. We need to go with that consensus. Maybe we need more resources for euthanasia and population control, but legalizing slaughter and the selling of horse meat is not the solution. And I think a vast majority of both New Mexicans and Americans agree that that is not the solution.
Back to you, Dan, on that. Does that count for you? I'm going to stay on this. The idea of what it does for New Mexico, what it does to our citizens' attitude about New Mexico, others about New Mexico.
No.
Does that matter?
It doesn't matter, because sometimes doing what's right isn't always what's popular. And I
Which
think
is
that's
the doing
what
of the right?
what you, well, I think
Of the you're saying
right,
opening
opening
is
up the
doing the
slaughter
right,
plan, it may not be what's popular, but you got to sometimes swim against the tide to get things done. And I think we have to also be careful, Gene. When you give the impression that this plant's only going to be taking drugged racehorses, that's not true. I mean, there's just up the road at Mescalero, they have a problem with wild horses up there destroying the watershed and doing things. So I think that at the end of the day, there are rules and regulations. I mean, these guys are not flying in a brand new, out of the box thinking we've never done this before. And I hope that they'll follow the rules and regulations. 40 jobs down there are an important amount of jobs. 40 jobs, sustainable jobs, mean a lot to a town of 50,000 people. And, I do think that there's an opportunity for an export of this meat outside of the United States. It's not something that you get at a restaurant here, but we do know outside of the United States, it is eaten. It's also used in the United States to make dog food and other things. And so this could be an opportunity. I just hope that, the government will step in, and instead of trying to fight these guys every step of the way, be there to help them do it right, get it open right, and do the right thing. And I just wish that some of the advocates that are opposed to this, would take some time to, be consistent in their comments and thoughts.
Interesting. The administration meaning the Obama administration, has signaled they are not crazy about this, and in fact, in their budget, they've stripped out the means to actually do this, which could be a way to just shut this whole thing down. I'm curious if they in fact do this and Congress acts, Is there going to be a problem that Dan's talking about here? People going to rise up and about too much government getting into private enterprise? Is that a danger here, or is it just so far beyond all of this that it just should be done and that damage can take care of itself later? What's your thought on that?
I don't know that if people will rise up, but
Sure.
you know, obviously this particular company has had an active legal team, an active lawyer that has been putting pressure on the administration and on the specifically on the USDA to get this plant. You know, to get everything cleared.
Sure.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's additional of that kind of strategy going on behind the scenes. But as far as, you know, the people that are heard, the more upright, the activists, I guess you could say, are more folks who are in the, you know, basically not wanting this particular plant, not the folks who want it. So I don't see an uprising per se afterwards, but maybe a legal strategy of some sort.
Because it seems to me what they're doing is taking advantage of a loophole that just happens to be out there now. You know, politics is like nature, abhors a vacuum. They see a vacuum, they've run into it. That could shut down very quickly as soon as this
being the
recess
owners?
is over. The owners, correct. And there's been some falsification on the applications that's come to light. There was some federal issues for the owner that didn't, you know, get
Well, they
included.
see an opportunity. I mean, a market,
Exactly,
right? So if
right.
there's no market, if that gets shut down and it becomes too difficult to make it work, then obviously the business plan doesn't work.
I guess I don't understand what
right.
everybody's, you know, Gene, and I mean, I just don't understand what everybody's so afraid of. If these guys are such bad guys and going to do such a bad job, open them up. Close them down with the laws that are in place. There are so many laws in place that if these guys don't do anything right, you can close them down. In turn, what's going to wind up happening is they may never open, but they're going to get a ton of tax dollars because they're going to sue the government that says you prevented us from doing this. I think the problem is, I feel from a lot of folks, Gene, is that people are afraid they may actually do it right. They may actually be good at what they
But
do.
Here's the problem. There's no way to do it right for a lot of people, Dan. There's no way to humanely do what you're talking
There's also
about.
no way to
There's
raise
just
chickens
no
right,
way.
and people still eat
Yes,
chicken,
sure
they still
there
eat
is.
beef.
Sure there is. There's a mass difference between how chickens are raised the right way or the wrong way.
Oh, Gene,
It's
veal
just one of
sells
those
off
things.
the shelves, and if you ever see how they raise veal,
I do.
Gene, okay, well, you can't advocate for that.
No.
That's a horrible thing, and yet it still sells every day.
I hear you, but the numbers are dropping. John makes the point. We're going to get out of this, unfortunately, but the numbers are dropping. I say John's onto it. The humane part of this is rising. There's a cultural agreement happening. We'll see where it plays out because that voice is going to be strong in this. Just after the break, a debate about New Mexico's primary elections and just who should be able to cast a vote in them.